Fayetteville is not something that everybody should be doing, so I'm about to give you a local's perspective and talk about some of the hard, honest truths that you need to know before moving to Fayetteville. In this video, we're going to be talking about crime, cost of living, which areas to avoid, and a few other things that you may have not even thought about. First up is that Fort Bragg kind of runs the show here, and this one may be a little bit obvious, but Fayetteville is home to Fort Bragg, which is one of the largest military bases in the entire world. So that means that the military basically influences everything here. Employment, traffic, even a high housing turnover. Actually, because of that high housing turnover, things tend to feel a little bit less rooted compared to cities where families have literally been living there for generations. By the way, if you're thinking of moving to Fayetteville, all of my contact info and booking info is in the description below, so if you'd like to get in contact with me, go check that out. Otherwise, let's keep going. Next up is the cost of living here in Fayetteville. So groceries, gas, and utilities tend to be a little bit cheaper than the national average. So you're not paying the big city price tags on it, and that also translates to the housing here. Housing in Fayetteville tends to be a little bit more affordable nationally, but also you can compare it to cities, pretty close by like Raleigh, Charlotte, Wilmington. And you don't have to take my word for it. Check out the sources yourself on these websites right here. But just understand that there's also a downside to this, right? So because there is a lower cost of living, sure, what also translates to that is there is a lower pay or lower wages that happen with jobs that aren't directly associated with the military or the hospital here. So yeah, there's always going to be a little bit of give and take, but the next topic is the crime here. So I'm not one to shy away from this topic because I do get calls, texts, and emails about this pretty often. But according to Neighborhood Scout, Fayetteville is only safer than 5% of the cities in the United States. And according to Area Vibes, Fayetteville's crime rates are 73% higher than the national average. So I know that sounds kind of crazy, right? But this is going to be my honest take on it. And you're around areas where crime is a little bit more prevalent, then you're kind of exposing yourself to it. If you pick the right area and you're doing the right activities, then it's 100% possible that you don't run into like craziness, on the day-to-day. This might feel like a lot to take into consideration, so if you guys want a copy of my relocation guide, just copy guide in the comments below and I'll send it straight over to you. Next up are the schools in Fayetteville, and they can be pretty hit or miss depending on which area you're living in. So overall, Cumberland County District doesn't rank very high in the state, but there are a few well-rated charter and magnet schools like Alpha Academy or Capital Encore Academy. But the best rated public high school in the area is Jack Britt High School, and this is a really desirable area because of that factor. You can also go the private school route, but tuition can be a little bit pricey. But the bottom line is that if schools are a priority for you and your family, then do some research on it and go to niche.com. That's the place I really recommend. Just keep in mind that the quality of school and the quality of neighborhood, they typically go hand in hand. So next up, I want to talk a little bit about what the weather is like here, just so that you guys can kind of know what to expect. So the summers here, they're pretty long, they're really hot, and they're really sticky. North Carolina is a really humid state, and it's pretty typical to see temperatures get up to 90 plus degrees. And that's not including the humidity factor on top of that. And because it's so, moist here, mosquitoes are also pretty crazy here as well. I've also been told by people I've helped relocate here that the days feel a lot longer, and in the summer it can get dark at around like 8:30, 9 p.m.-ish. So in the winter it's the exact opposite. It'll get dark, really early at like 5-ish o'clock. So the winters here are pretty mild, especially if you're comparing it to states up north. You'll get the occasional cold snap, and it may snow like every other year or so. As for the spring, the pollen here, it is pretty brutal, right? It'll cover, your entire car and basically everything else. But overall, if you don't mind hot weather, or I think it's pretty comparable to Florida, if you don't mind that type of weather, then this place won't be so bad. But if you don't like hot, humid, sticky climate, then you might have a little bit of a rough time here. So next up, I want to talk about the traffic, especially the traffic near base. So there are two main roads that are notorious for having a lot of traffic on them, and that's Bragg Boulevard and Skybo Road. And yes, it's pronounced Skybo, not Skibo. I've heard both pronunciations. Look, I've been here since I was a kid. I've always said Skybo. But if you plan on traveling on either of these two roads, especially during like peak commute times, like around PT hours or like 5 p.m., you need to plan on an extra commute time. Otherwise, you're probably going to be running late. Again, you know, Fort Bragg, it does kind of control, like I said, basically everything here. So when soldiers are getting on and off work, that's typically when you'll see a lot of traffic here. So around the main gates like All-American, Riley, and Yadkin, again, at those PT hours, at those peak hours, that's when you can expect a lot of traffic. Next up is that Fayetteville is pretty centrally located in North Carolina, and this isn't something that I hear a lot of people talk about often, but you're relatively close to a lot of the major hotspots in North Carolina. So you're an hour to an hour and a half away from Raleigh, you're 2 hours away from most of the beach towns like Wilmington, and you're about 3 hours away from Asheville, which is of course the mountains. So locationally, this is a great spot if you like to travel. Plus, it gives you a lot of options if you're looking for day trips or weekend getaways, or if you and the wife want to go on a date night or something like that. And in my opinion, it's not super far away to where you would, have to take off work or you would have to take leave. Like, you could just go there and then come back. Not to mention, there are a ton of highways going through Fayetteville, like I-95, 295, Highway 87. So Fayetteville is pretty well connected to a lot of the neighboring cities, so it's not too much of a hassle to leave. Next up is the food scene here and what it's kind of like. So Fayetteville has a lot of chain restaurants, think like Olive Garden, Texas Roadhouse, Red Lobster, things like that. One of the main perks about Fayetteville is because of the diverse crowd that Fort Bragg brings, that means there's a lot of diverse food here. However, we are still in the South, of course, right? So there are still, southern food spots, but there's also a good mix of like Japanese food, Mexican food, Korean, Chinese, things like that. So would I consider Fayetteville to be like a foodie city? I don't think I would say all that, but there is a good diverse and a good mix of food for you to choose from, so it's enough to keep you busy. Next up, I want to talk about what there is to do in Fayetteville specifically. So I know I mentioned that you can travel outside of Fayetteville and go to the mountains or the beach or whatever, but what about in Fayetteville specifically? So there is the Cape Fear River Trail, which is about a 5-mile long paved trail. This is a really popular spot for bikers or if you like to go for a run or a walk in nature. But the golf scene here is also pretty huge. I'd say at most you're probably like 15 to 20 minutes away from your nearest golf course. And not to mention, you're about an hour to an hour and a half away from Pinehurst, which is where they host the US Open for professional golf sometimes. Now, my personal favorite spot that I like to go golfing in is Baywood. And it's for a couple of reasons, but the biggest one is that it's not super busy there. It's pretty cheap compared to some of the other golf courses, and I think the course at Baywood is pretty easy. Now, as far as nightlife is concerned, do not expect a bunch of clubs. There are a couple of clubs, but that's not what Fayetteville's really known for. Fayetteville has more of like a dive bar type scene. So, pool tables, cheap drinks, the bar will have its locals. There might be a karaoke night or something like that. That's definitely a little bit more common, and, Fayetteville has enough nightlife and things to do to keep you busy, but if you're wanting like very unique experiences or like a big city vibe, then Fayetteville's not gonna fill that void for you. Last but not least, I want to talk about the growth and potential here in Fayetteville and some of the surrounding cities. So there are all kinds of builders right now building all kinds of stuff. Homes, shopping centers, restaurants, you name it. But some of the areas more specifically that are blowing up is like Rayford, Aberdeen, Spring Lake, Lillington. Fayetteville's also got some new construction in some areas, but a lot of it's already been developed in. So other than new shopping centers, there's not really a whole lot of new neighborhoods going on. But comparing Fayetteville right now to how it was 10, 15 years ago when I was a kid, Fayetteville is like almost complete 180. So yeah, Fayetteville is still a little bit behind compared to like cities like Raleigh or Charlotte, for example, especially when it comes to jobs, schools, and nightlife, entertainment. But I think I see the potential there, and I could only see it going up from here. So there you have it. That was my list of 10 things that I wish I knew before I moved here. If you'd like to get in touch with me, all of my booking and contact info is in the description below. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.